Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a day that is, for millions of Christians in the U.S., profoundly significant, Good Friday.
It really is. It's central to so many communities, Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant.
But our mission today is, it's more than just a history lesson.
Right.
We want to cut through some of the noise and really get at the friction points. I mean, how does this ancient solemn practice actually survive in a fast-paced, modern American work week?
And that's the key question,
Yep.
especially when it's a major religious day that isn't a public holiday.
Exactly. So we've pulled together the sources to explore tradition, adaptation, and cultural change. Okay, let's unpack this.
And I think we have to start with that spiritual foundation, because
Uh-huh.
its depth is what directly conflicts with all those modern demands.
Okay.
Good Friday commemorates the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It is the absolute center of Holy Week. Its meaning hasn't changed, but the world around it absolutely has.
Forcing some pretty difficult choices on people every single year.
When you look at the traditional practice,
Mhm.
the one word that comes to mind is solemnity.
Okay.
It is, at its core, a day of mourning. It's about intense spiritual reflection. The services themselves are long. They're deeply structured.
So not just a quick in and out.
Not at all. You have readings from the Passion narrative, the gospel stories of Jesus' trial and death.
Right.
But it's not just a recitation. It's meant to be immersive.
Mm.
For instance, in many Catholic traditions, the afternoon service has the veneration of the cross.
Mm.
Orthodox churches have specific lamentations, these rituals around a symbolic deposition of Christ's body. These aren't just moments. They're rigorous spiritual exercises. Prayer, fasting, sometimes silence.
The detail about the time commitment really jumps out from the sources, especially when you think about the demands of just an average Friday.
Yeah,
We're talking about services that often last for a full 3 hours.
a full 3 hours. That's intentional.
And think about that. 3 hours, usually time to reflect the period Jesus is believed to have been on the cross, often from, noon to 3 p.m.
Right in the middle of the workday.
It's a radical act of disruption in a culture that is all about productivity. It just shows the willpower it takes to, stop the momentum of the week for that spiritual focus.
And that's critical to the emotional purpose here. This isn't a day for, quick box ticking.
Right.
It is fundamentally a day of deep spiritual mourning. It's focused entirely on sacrifice and suffering, and it's all designed to prepare you for the message of hope that comes on Sunday.
So that duration, that formality, it's all part of making sure people really engage with the gravity of it all.
Exactly.
So, okay, we have this deeply embedded 3-hour expectation of solemnity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's pivot to the challenge. How do you fit that into the schedule of the United States?
Well, this is where we hit the essential friction point,
Yeah.
and it comes down to one single crucial factor. Good Friday is not a federal holiday in the U.S.
It's not. A few states recognize it, but nationally, it's business as usual.
It is. Schools are open, workplaces are running, and the implications of that are they're enormous.
Because in other countries, the whole country just stops.
Right. But here, millions of people have to actively negotiate their spiritual needs against their job, their education. Most people are just expected to be at their desks or in class.
So it forces this very personal choice. You have to decide, am I going to use a vacation day? Squeeze something into my lunch break?
Yes. And that completely changes the dynamic.
It seems like you're trading public visibility for personal flexibility, in a way. Does that make it harder for the culture at large to even see its importance?
That's a fascinating way to put it.
Yeah.
And yes, you are definitely trading visibility.
Mhm.
When a day like this isn't on the public calendar, the responsibility just shifts entirely onto the individual. And that can create real conflict in the workplace.
I can imagine.
You might feel this pressure, whether it's subtle or not, to just skip the service or move a meeting or maybe downplay the day to colleagues who just see it as another Friday.
And the sources really highlight that for millions of people, that pressure is immense.
It is. You basically have to become an expert schedule manager just to honor a profound spiritual commitment while sticking to a secular calendar that's all about output.
But that resilience, that active choice to observe it anyway, that really says something about the nature of faith in America, doesn't it?
It says everything. It's voluntary and it's deeply held.
So this kind of pressure cooker environment has, it seems, spurred a lot of innovation, a lot of adaptability.
Absolutely.
So how are these traditions adapting, especially after, everything we've been through globally in the last few years?
Well, the most immediate solution has been the massive shift to virtual services.
Of course.
I saw it explode during the pandemic, obviously, but that infrastructure is here to stay. It's a permanent fixture now, and it directly helps with that logistical problem.
So if you're stuck at work, you can just log on.
Exactly. Or if you're a student far from home, a live stream service lets you participate without having to physically clock out. But what's important is what that does to the experience.
Right. Is watching on a screen the same?
Does that virtual morning give you the same communal feeling? The sources suggest it provides connection, sure, but maybe a different kind of reflection, perhaps more isolated.
Here's where I think it gets really interesting, though. The relevance of the day seems to be expanding beyond just church services.
Oh, for sure.
It's merging with these, secular trends. I'm thinking about mindfulness, wellness, fasting.
That crossover is a key trend. The traditional parts of Good Friday discipline, self-denial, silence, they translate perfectly into modern wellness goals.
So it's not just religious?
Not more. Yeah. Not entirely. People are doing things like digital fasting, staying off social media for a day. Not for religious atonement, but for mental clarity.
And that 3-hour service could be reframed as a structured mindfulness break.
Precisely. You're intentionally pausing your brain to focus on one deep topic. So the themes of the day are reaching a much wider audience, even if they don't subscribe to the theology behind it.
And we're also seeing that in interfaith settings, right? The sources mention that.
Yes, communities are using the core concepts, suffering, compassion, redemption, to start dialogues that cross religious lines. It becomes less about one specific event and more about universal human values.
Which is a huge shift.
As we look at younger generations, that relationship with Good Friday becomes even more nuanced.
So personal.
Exactly. For many millennials and Gen Z, it's often more of a cultural or personal connection. It's elective. It's not necessarily about rigid adherence to an institution.
And that's because they're the ones facing that friction most intensely, right? They're in high-pressure schools where exams and sports practices they go on as normal.
They do. They're asked to observe a solemn fast while the entire world of their peers is running at full speed.
So you get this conflict. You might feel a deep connection to the tradition, but missing a university lecture for it requires a justification that your peers just don't have to make.
And so that engagement, it often shifts. It moves from being about mandatory attendance to being about personal choice.
So they might see it as a day for quiet reflection or reading.
Or doing service projects that align with the themes of compassion. If we connect this to the bigger picture, observance is becoming highly individualized. It reflects the reality that faith in America is often a matter of personal selection, not a monolithic expectation.
So the tradition isn't dying. It's just evolving into something more chosen, more internalized.
Which might make it more resilient in the long run.
So let's bring this all together. The so what of all this. Beyond the faith communities, why should understanding Good Friday matter to every listener, regardless of their background?
Well, first, the core themes are universal. Sacrifice, redemption, hope. These are fundamental human stories that go way beyond any single doctrine.
So it gives you insight into the worldview of a huge part of the population.
A huge part. And second, this entire discussion is really a case study in religious freedom in America.
How so?
It shows how these deeply important spiritual practices can persist even without any kind of state endorsement. Good Friday is almost like a barometer for how traditional faith survives the pressure of a secular public calendar.
And for you, the listener, the practical application is pretty clear. Understanding the day and the personal effort it takes to observe it, that builds respect. It helps build real dialogue.
It moves you beyond just tolerance to a much richer understanding of the cultural rhythms that actually shape this country.
We've taken this deep dive into Good Friday, looking at the challenges of observing such a solemn day when it's not a federal holiday. We've tracked its evolution through digital services, its surprising overlap with wellness trends,
and how younger generations are internalizing its meaning.
Yeah.
The synthesis here is really all about adaptability. When that external formal support structure isn't there, the tradition is forced inward.
It becomes more personal.
More elective, and, ironically, maybe more sustainable in a free society. It ensures its relevance by being more flexible, more thematically broad.
So what does this all mean for the future of religious practice in America? We started with ancient tradition and we ended with this idea of radical personal choice. So here's the thought for you to consider. In an increasingly diverse America where traditional religious days have to compete with work and school, How does the act of choosing personal, quiet reflection, like we've been discussing, how does that fundamentally change the public meaning and future of American religious freedom?
It's a great question.
Does privatizing observance actually strengthen faith? Or does it just remove it from the civic sphere entirely?
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this knowledge informs your understanding of the cultural and spiritual currents that shape America today. We'll see you next time.